Round 3 of the Supercars Championship is in the bag. We had some fantastic racing in Perth on the Saturday, a little bit on the tame side for Sunday, but I was trackside for the very first time with Gen 3, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself despite that slightly tamer end to proceedings. As always, I'm here to recap the weekend with you guys, discuss all the key talking points, share my views on some of the on-track and off-track incidents, and just get stuck into it as this championship continues to unfold. Let's kick off like we always do by recapping how each race unfolded. Race 1 was certainly the shining light from this event. Brodie Kostecki jumped Shane van Gisbergen off the start line, which set us up for a fantastic race to the finish. The pair closed up towards the pit stop window, with Shane van Gisbergen actually overtaking Brodie Kostecki, but just a lap or two later, Brodie Kostecki was back up the inside, taking the lead back in what was a fantastic battle. Erebus pit Brodie Kostecki long before Shane van Gisbergen, who stayed out to get a tyre advantage at the end, and the end was thrilling. They closed up with about 4 laps left, Shane van Gisbergen on the attack, Brodie on the most aggressive defense we've seen in a very long time, and there was actually a lot of controversy attached to both the defending on Brodie's side and the attacking on Shane van Gisbergen's side. We're going to look at that a bit later in the video in a little bit more detail, but ultimately Shane van Gisbergen prevailed. The podium was SVG, followed by Brodie Kostecki and Reynolds, who nearly nabbed second, taking home third. Unfortunately, the appetizer on Saturday was far more exciting than the main course on Sunday. Race 2 unfolded with Will Brown converting pole position over Davey Reynolds. Davey Reynolds' day went from bad to worse, with Brodie Kostecki soon taking second place to make it an Erebus 1-2. And then Anton De Pasquale came in and treated Davey Reynolds like a punching bag, locking up on a botched overtake into turn 7, unfortunately running both he and Davey Reynolds quite wide. De Pasquale copped a 15-second penalty for that one, and other than that, there wasn't an awful lot left to the race. We had a few gear tower failures in some of the cars, such as Tim Slade, which put them out of competitive contention, and it was an Erebus domination with Will Brown taking the win, Brodie Kostecki in second, and James Courtney taking a well-deserved third after a challenging start to the season. That leads us into race 3, the third and final one of the weekend, which Brock Feeney kicked off by converting his pole position, holding the lead into turn 1. Will Brown had some great Sunday pace continue, with him soon overtaking Kostecki for second place, the Erebus pair racing nice and cleanly together. The battle for the win was actually hyped up a little bit, with suggestions Will Brown might be able to challenge Feeney around the pit stop window, but unfortunately by the time they cycled through the pit lane, Feeney still maintained a pretty comfortable lead, and we didn't get a repeat of that awesome Erebus Red Bull battle from the Saturday. It was a tame event overall, with Brock Feeney taking that win, followed by Will Brown and Brodie Kostecki in third. So how did all this line up with my pre-round predictions? Well, not good. I had a near perfect score on the prediction front leaving Melbourne, but it got turned on its head for Perth. I predicted a collision in qualifying for Supercars. This was off the back of some very close calls around Wanneroo Raceway in recent years. Fortunately, we did not see that, so I'm more than happy to take the L on that prediction. I also predicted a win for Cameron Waters. This one, as I openly admitted, was heart over head on this one. I just wanted to see him get a little bit of payback for an unfortunate result, a race win that, in my opinion, he should have kept in 2022. That did not happen though. He actually had a pretty rough weekend overall. And I predicted a rollover in one of the categories, whether that be Supercars or one of the supports. This was off the back of Barbagallo or Wanneroo or Carco, whatever we want to call it, having very deep sand. We didn't see a rollover, fortunately, once again, but I tell you what, one of the Supercars drivers gave it a red hot go, and that brings us to the Carnage Report. Overall, it was a really clean weekend with no major damage, but we did have a few offs, kicking off with that 90-minute practice session on the Friday. We had a red flag early on with Macaulay Jones getting it beached down at turn 7 in his very shiny Pizza Hut car that suddenly needed a pretty deep clean. Then Cameron Hill had a huge moment down towards turn 6. This was the driver that was very lucky not to roll it. He went into the sand at high speed sideways, and you could see that car pitch up a little bit bit as he went over the ripples in the sand, but was very lucky and did not go over, just requiring a little bit of a cleanup throughout that car. No damage to note during qualifying, but once racing got underway, we did see Cameron Waters get spun round at turn 7. Bit of a fun story attached to this one. I was actually standing quite close to a Cameron Waters fan, and when he looked on the big screen and saw his driver facing backwards, let's just say he was none too pleased. But I have a theory on why this weekend was so clean, and that's because all the carnage, all the chaos, all the brutality and broken pieces were focused on one thing. Brodie Kostecki's rear bumper. It got hit at turn 1, it got hit at turn 4, it got hit at turn 5, it got hit the whole way round this track. He was pushed around like a shopping trolley by Shane van Gisbergen, which was incredibly exciting racing in my opinion. But it does bring us along to the segment of the show called Clash Chat, where I take the biggest on-track incident from the weekend and break it down in a bit more detail, giving you my personal opinion. So let's set the scene. It was the dying moments of the Saturday race. Brodie Kostecki had the lead with Shane van Gisbergen rocketing up behind him on much fresher tyres. Now, Brodie Kostecki, I want to compliment him for such a spirited defence. I've not seen someone fight tooth and nail for a victory quite that much in Supercars in a very long time. It was really exciting to watch and put on a great show for us as spectators. But Brodie Kostecki did have to get his elbows out. He blocked in places I didn't even know you needed to block. He was in the pit exit out of turn 1 in front of us at one point, which was just insane to watch. I'd never seen cars battle on that part of the racetrack before. But it did culminate with him blocking Giz into turn 6 and race control actually dishing out a warning for driving standards due to that block. Now, when I got home that night, I asked you guys what you thought of this one, and 83% of you thought that warning from race control was an overreaction. And I've got to say, at the track, and I think the vast majority of fans around me seemed to agree that it was an overreaction, and we were pretty gutted to see race control put a bit of a downer on that battle at the time because we were enjoying it so much. Come the Sunday though, Larko did do a really good breakdown where he showed multiple angles, a bit of a digital reconstruction of the battle as well. And he did point out that Shane van Gisbergen did actually have an overlap running down there into turn 6 where Brodie Kostecki blocked him and ultimately got that warning. So looking back on it, I have actually shifted. I do think race control were justified in putting that warning out there, but I am glad it was just a warning. They were just letting the drivers know that, hey, there's standards here, we're watching, and fortunately they didn't go any further than just that warning. So it didn't have any impact in the end, but nevertheless, I think we're all kind of backing the underdog in that situation, which meant when that call first came out, I think there was a little bit of outrage. But looking back on it, I think it was a fair judgment and well managed by race control. On the flip side of things, Erebus were not happy with the ultimate move that SVG pulled for the win. It was once again going down towards turn 6. Brodie Kostecki left the door open just enough for Shane van Gisbergen to stick his nose up the inside. And in hindsight, I should have got you guys to vote your thoughts on this one as well, because I think the results would have been interesting. But for me, I think it was okay. I think Gizzy got just up alongside far enough to justify and command that track position. The two ran side by side through the rest of the corner, making a bit of contact, but in my opinion, it was all fair from that point on. Now, I think it's important to stress that both Kostecki and Van Giz both seemed pretty stoked actually about how fun the racing was. They didn't seem too upset with each other at any point, but Erebus did lodge an appeal with race control for them to review the incident and potentially penalise Shane van Gisbergen. That was ultimately thrown out, which I think is the right decision. It was a shame it got so political in the end, but the driver's job is to race hard and the team's job is to back them. So, you can't blame Erebus for pushing the envelope as far as they could off track, but I think race control made a good call by not taking this one any further. Ultimately, I'm just going to put this one down to good, hard racing. Brodie Kostecki put up a very spirited and aggressive defense. Shane van Gisbergen attacked with equal amounts of ferocity. The boys went tip for tap. They took it right to the limit without crossing it. And overall, I just love this. I think this was a fantastic battle and hopefully something we're going to see a lot more of in Gen 3. Keeping that positivity going, let's talk about the weekend wins. These are the good things that came from this round of racing, and the first thing I want to shout out is the fact that Gen 3 fires appear, touch wood, to have been resolved. Obviously, we saw 2 Mustangs light up in Melbourne. Supercars made a raft of technical changes to the vehicles on the back of that, and from Perth at least, it seems like those problems no longer exist. So fingers crossed they have put that one to bed. Obviously, when we get to the hotter rounds, I'm sure everyone will get a little bit nervous again, but hopefully that is in the past. The other key positive I want to shout out is that while the Sunday racing was on the more subdued side, we still had 3 different winners from 3 different races. I think in previous years of Supercars, if someone came out of the blocks and won that first race, there's a very good chance they were going to sweep the whole weekend. So it's good to see that variety on the top step of the podium. And finally, this was the largest and most enthusiastic crowd I've seen at Wanneroo Raceway in many, many years. I think this was a big tick for Gen 3 in my opinion. My mate and I got to the track about 40 minutes before the gates opened on Sunday, and even then there was a queue of people well over 100 meters long ready to get into the circuit. I haven't seen a response like that to the V8s in Perth in a very long time. And by the end of the day, they were even using the overflow car parking, which again has been pretty unused in recent years. So it's great to see those numbers flock to the track. Gen 3 has clearly reinvigorated the fan base, at least here in Western Australia. And when the cars were on track, mobile phones were coming out, people were taking photos, videos on a level I haven't seen in a long time as well. So I think Gen 3 is doing its job with the crowd reaction. It's certainly drawing people, and hopefully over the coming years it's going to keep people coming back as well. In the interest of balance, let's take a look at the weekend woes. These are the things that didn't go so well from this round of racing. And the first thing I want to mention is that we did see more Gen 3 fragility with failed gear towers on multiple cars. Hopefully that's an easy fix and they'll take care of all that before Tassie. And then, as I've mentioned multiple times, the weekend did peak a little bit early. We did have a very tame end to proceedings on Sunday. It was a double-edged sword because we did have that amazing show on Saturday, which put my expectations at least sky high for Sunday, the arguably most important day of the event. But the racing didn't really deliver, which is a bit of a shame, bit of a downer to finish up on, but that's the way sport goes sometimes. And that brings me to my overall weekend rating, which I am going to put pretty bang average in the middle. I've ranked this one 3 out of 5 stars. Again, just because we did have that tale of 2 halves with not much going on the Sunday. I think also I'm potentially a little bit harsher on this round simply because it is my local round. It's the one time Supercars come over to Western Australia each year. And obviously when you're paying money to be trackside and you look forward to it every year, you hope for an absolute worldie of an event. But it doesn't always happen. I'm very grateful for what we saw on Saturday. But overall, I would say the weekend was sort of in the middle in terms of entertainment value. You guys were a lot more positive though. 55% of you rated this one 4 out of 5 stars, a few even going for 5 out of 5. So overall, I think this was a round that the vast majority of people enjoyed. That leads us on to your questions and talking points. We're going to start off here with one from Chris Croft, who mentioned that Perth exaggerated the issues some teams are having with tyre life and consistency. Teams just can't seem to run with AAA. And this is a good point. The tyres, the compound, are one of the few things that have not changed coming into the new Gen 3 era. And we're seeing that Red Bull continue to apply their art, their trade when it comes to getting the most out of that rubber. We are seeing other teams getting there. Grove are starting to show signs of competing at that top level, perhaps still got some way to go with working those tyres out. But Erebus, I think when the conditions line up, they can execute. They put in an almost Red Bull-esque dominant 1-2 performance in that second race in Perth. So yeah, we are seeing some of that knowledge from the previous era of Supercars still translating over due to that tyre not changing, but we are seeing the other teams gradually getting towards unlocking their potential as well. The second comment here from Zeiss, this one really made me laugh actually. This was a funny moment from the weekend with Garth Tander and Craig Lowndes sitting down with Mark Winterbottom, Frosty as we all know him, to celebrate the 600th race he's doing in the championship, a massive milestone. And when you have these milestones in Formula One, they're not far off having a flyover from the Royal Air Force to mark the occasion. But in Supercars, they sat Frosty on a bench and they shoved a $5 Willys mug cake at him. It was just the most Australian way to mark a milestone. It was very, very funny. And it was interesting to see Mark reflect on his years in the championship and also mention how Gen 3 has reinvigorated him as well, even if he didn't have the most exciting weekend here in Perth. And then a final point from Norrie here. He points out from the first 9 races of the season, Ford still hasn't won on track. They obviously picked up the victory in Newcastle, but that was due to Red Bull's disqualification from the top step of the podium. So I bring this up not because we know for sure what the parity situation is. I think the paper, the result sheets is a little bit misleading because Ford were so close to a win in race 2 in Newcastle. I think they could have won a couple of races in Melbourne had things unfolded a bit differently as well. So they've been there or thereabouts, but I hope just for the competition's sake and the show's sake that we do see those two brands go head to head for wins very, very soon, because the battle in Perth on Saturday was amazing and the crowd really got into it between the two Camaros. And if we had a Camaro and a Mustang doing that, I think it would just be incredible for the sport, and I really hope we see that soon. Alright, now that I've blown up the comment section, let's take a look at the championship standings. On the driver's side of things, Brodie Kostecki still leads the way. Chaz Mostert still holding down second despite not having the greatest weekend in Perth. Shane van Gisbergen holding down third, Will Brown in fourth, Brock Feeney in fifth, Davey Reynolds sixth, Cameron Waters in seventh. Again, surprised to still see him so high up after Perth. Same story with Andre Heimgartner, still up there in the top 10. Will Davidson is a name I'm surprised to see crack the 10 as well. He seems to have been a bit anonymous recently, and Jack LeBrock in 10th. On the team side of things, we have Erebus leading the way, followed by Red Bull Racing, Penrite in 3rd, Walkinshaw Andretti United in 4th, and Tickford Racing in 5th. Even though the racing wasn't the most exciting on the Sunday, I still think this was a really good round for the sake of the championship. We're seeing multiple teams towards the front, multiple drivers up there as well. So once again, hopefully good signs for the rest of the season. Let's wrap this up by taking a look at the supports in Perth. The Dunlop Series, both of those races were won by Ryan Wood, a really good performance from him. V8 Super Utes kicked off their season and it was a clean sweep for Aaron Borg, but don't let that fool you. The racing was pretty exciting, especially race 4, well worth a watch if you haven't seen it already. GT World Challenge Australia, one of those races was won by Liam Talbot and Max Hoffer, and the second race was won by Yassir Sahin and Garnet Patterson. Sorry, I probably butchered the pronunciations there. And then finally, WA Historics were putting on a show. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the result sheet to shout out the winners of this one, but it was thoroughly entertaining racing. It was good to see those Historics bashing it around Barbagallo. So attention now turns to the next round of the championship in Tasmania, and it's really important to stress that if you want to tune in for my round preview, this channel is going to have a new name by the time you see me next. It's going to be called Fan at the Fence. You can see that new logo we're going to have on screen at the moment. So please do subscribe if you want to make sure that you're still getting my content even after the rename takes place. It is just a cosmetic change. The channel's still 100% V8 Supercars focused with round previews, reviews, and loads of discussion videos in between. So looking forward to that name change. It's going to happen on the 12th of May. So please keep an eye out for that new branding. It's still me and still the content that I hope you've been enjoying. Until then, please remember to treat people like your trackside down there in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed the action from Perth, and I will see you in the next video very soon.